Okay, everyone should be coming in now. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We'll just give it a few moments for everyone to start coming in from the lobby or the green room, and we'll be getting started in the next minute or so.
Hi, Heidi. Hi, Cindy.
And we've got quite a lot of people coming in today, so we'll give them a chance to arrive, because this is going to be a great session and no one's going to want to miss a single part of it. I think personally, I think we're a little bit biased, but
maybe a little bit.
Okay. So I'll get started whilst people are coming in. Just as a little reminder, this session is being recorded. So we will send this recording out to everyone afterwards. And you can also get all the recordings from all past sessions on our website as well. Okay. So before we dive into today's session, I just wanted to share with you our exclusive March offer that is only available to the people in this people community. Now, stress is something that we all experience, and it is very common at work. So right now we are offering a 50% discount on our most in-demand workshop, which is Moving Through Stress, but only for the first 5 organisations that book before the end of March. Now, this session is packed with practical tools to help employees understand stress and how it hijacks the body and brain. We'll look at the different forms of stress and proven ways to deal with it, and burnout as well. Now, this session or this workshop is normally $550, but for this community only, we are not advertising it anywhere else. It's just $275, and that is for an online delivery up to 100 delegates. I will put the details of this offer into the chat in just a moment, but if you're interested, then drop us a message and we'll get you booked in for that session. But now, without any more chatting from me, I'm going to hand over to Lianne so she can get started on today's session.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's People session. For those of you, okay, no worries, Sean. Oh, she can't hear me, can she? So for those of you who haven't met us before, I'm Lianne Weaver, one half of Beam Development and Training. Tom is the other half. We deliver wellbeing and personal development workshops, training courses and programs all around the world. So we train in 45 countries, and all of our workshops are very science focused. So we deliver sessions that are based around psychology, behavioral science, neuroscience, and neuropsychology, making sure that we give you and our delegates the most up-to-date information with practical tools and techniques to really become self-reliant and deal with challenges they face. Through that time, we have encountered an awful lot of people who are in people-centric roles, who are really passionate about supporting the people they care for, the people they support, but often end up neglecting themselves, forgetting to care for themselves. It's what's known as the well-being paradox. We care for everyone else and we don't take care of our own needs. So as a result of that, Tom and I set up People last September. And the idea is that we deliver these really impactful lunch and learns once a month on topics that really impact those people-centric people. So you can have a little look at our schedule. We've got it scheduled right till the end of the year, so you can have a little look at that. And as Tom said, every session gets recorded. So if you go to the website, you'll also be able to view any that we've covered in the past, things like empathetic leadership, well-being for people, positive habits for people, all sorts of topics. And today's is one that I know impacts every people person, or maybe just every person. And it's having difficult conversations. This is a topic that, if you're in a people-centric role, you will know only too well. There will be so many times in your role where you have a conversation where you're uncomfortable, you're not sure how to manage it, you're perhaps dealing with someone difficult or challenging. And so, in the little bit of time we've got together today, I want to really start to highlight what makes conversation difficult and give you some practical tools and techniques for any of those conversations you might have coming up. So, what we're going to look at today is, oh, I was click happy, is understanding difficult conversations. So, being aware of what makes conversation difficult and what are the likely triggers for that. I'm then going to talk about really our mindset. So, how we can change how we think about a difficult conversation, how we can prepare for it better. And I'm going to share some really good strategies for effective communication, for being able to say what you want to say, but through a really caring and empathetic lens. And then I'm going to give you some strategies for how we can handle resistance, even if we're dealing with a difficult conversation as prepared as we can be. There are often times where people will still be resistant to it. So I'm going to share with you some really useful strategies. So what makes a conversation difficult? Why are some conversations more difficult than others? As I've said, as people, it's just inevitable that we're going to engage in some conversations that we find hard to broach, that we feel uncomfortable with, that we feel that if we could, we'd probably avoid it. And it can be for lots of different reasons. But one of the things that I think is useful to recognize, first of all, is what's going on in my brain when I have to have a difficult conversation with someone. So I might be able to talk to this person completely normally most of the time, but now I've been asked to have this difficult conversation and I'm avoiding it. I don't want to do it. So our brain is really hardwired to get us to avoid anything that causes us any level of pain. So, for example, if as a child you touched a fire, your brain would have really hardwired that that was painful and got you to avoid not only touching the same fire again, but actually anything that represented a fire, anything that was hot or orange or glowing, anything that made you believe it could potentially burn you. And so that prevents us from getting hurt again. I don't have to go up to a fire every month and see if it still hurts. And the part of the brain that's responsible for that is known as the negativity bias. If something hurts me, then my brain will over-remember it, over-focus on it, and prevent me from engaging with that again in the future. Now, when we're talking about difficult conversations, we know that we won't physically get burnt, but many of us have been psychologically burnt from difficult conversations. So maybe we've had a conversation in the past where the other person got angry and aggressive, or maybe they got really defensive, or maybe they burst out crying. And to our brain, it was a painful experience. And so the negativity bias kicks in and it tries to get us to avoid going towards those conversations in the future. Now, that's not very useful in terms of us being a human being anyway, but it's really not useful if we are in a role where we have to handle and manage other people. So we're going to explore some of those reasons in a bit more detail in a moment. But in the meantime, I want you to just mull over a question. What type of conversations do you find most challenging? That could be at work or at home. But is there a certain type? Is it giving bad news? Is it giving feedback? Is it saying no to someone? Is it expressing your own personal boundaries? Just have a little think. I'm not going to ask you to share, but you'll notice that you have your own personal way of dealing with that. So, why do conversations become difficult? Often a difficult conversation triggers some sort of emotional, psychological, or even a relational challenge. And that can make it uncomfortable or even a high stakes conversation. And here are the key reasons why that would happen. So emotional discomfort. So, as I've said, we may have had an experience before that makes us want to avoid it. We may fear conflict. We might worry that the conversation will get out of hand, become heated, become confrontational. We might be really worried that we'll hurt someone else's feelings. We don't want to make someone upset. We don't want to make someone feel embarrassed or ashamed. We might fear rejection or backlash, worrying that speaking up might cause some negative consequence, like damaging a relationship or people thinking less of you. I know from my experience of coaching people, particularly new managers, there's often a fear of speaking up and having a difficult conversation because you don't want to seem that you're naive or that you're inexperienced. And so we avoid that emotional discomfort. Maybe a manager avoids telling an employee that there's challenges with their performance because they don't want to demotivate them. Then we've got uncertainty or a lack of control. Maybe we just don't know how this other person will react. Maybe they're unpredictable. Maybe they have a reputation for getting angry. Maybe they completely shut down and we don't know how to deal with it. Or maybe they're very dismissive. We also might feel that we're underprepared or under-equipped. We might think that we don't have the right words or the background or enough information or even just the confidence to navigate it smoothly. Or we might just be scared of saying the wrong thing. Definitely in our experience of working with well-being and mental well-being challenges, a lot of the time in terms of well-being, conversations are not had because we're worried about making the situation worse. We're worried about upsetting the person. And actually that can often make it much harder for the other person and make them feel more isolated. Maybe the conversation is a high stake conversation that has heavy consequences. So maybe the outcome really matters. Perhaps it could impact someone's job, their well-being, their reputation, their relationships. Maybe you're in a situation where you need to challenge someone about their behavior, and actually if that got out within the company, people would see them differently. Maybe there's a power dynamic at play where you're talking to someone more senior and they're using that over you. Maybe it is just that difficult person or handling a really uncomfortable complaint about someone who's usually a popular member of staff. Or maybe we're delivering some difficult truths. For example, redundancy. Many of you here will have had to handle redundancies or addressing some misconduct. So the stakes can be high, emotions are likely to be high. Nobody really wants to be the person who delivers bad news. Another reason is it's someone that you clash with. Maybe a clash in perspective, maybe there's some resistance there. Maybe you're in a situation where each person sees the situation from their own viewpoint and they won't meet in the middle ground. The other person might become defensive, angry, dismissive, and those strong emotional reactions might clash with you. You might not be used to that. Or maybe they refuse to acknowledge the issue and just shut the conversation down. Nope, that didn't happen. Not going to have that conversation. A good example of this is if you're in a HR role and you're mediating conflict between two employees and they both refuse to see middle ground. They both think they're right and refuse to compromise. And then we've all got our own stories. So whether it's us having that conversation or the person on the receiving end of it, we might feel triggered by something. We might feel there's some bias at play. So we might feel our ego or our identity is threatened. Perhaps the feedback feels much more like a personal attack than constructive criticism. We might have our own cognitive biases that are at play, perhaps justifying our actions and struggling to see that other person's perspective. And there may be some psychological safety concerns. So if someone feels unheard, if they feel dismissed, undervalued, they can start to withdraw, become defensive and disengaged. So let's say a senior leader has received some feedback that their behavior is negatively impacting someone in the team. But instead of them reflecting, taking it on board, seeing it as helpful to know that information, they become defensive or they just dismiss it as not a big deal. Makes it a really hard conversation. So there are lots of different strategies we can use to put in place for this. And my favorite one, which some of you will have come across before, is oh, excuse me, my slides are going really funny today, is the Thomas Kilmann conflict model. This is such a powerful tool for understanding how people respond to conflict in different situations. And I want you, when I'm going through this, if you've not seen it before, to really, first of all, reflect on your experience of this. When have I used each of these styles? So the Thomas Kilmann conflict model recognizes 5 primary conflict handling styles. Each has a balance between assertiveness, so the extent to which I want to satisfy my own needs, and then cooperativeness, the extent to which I want to satisfy the needs of others. Now, each style is useful in different situations, so there is no right or wrong style here. Don't think the middle one is the right one. The key to effective conflict management is actually knowing when to adapt your approach and when to use each different style. So if we have a little look through, let's start with the top left. Oh, it's my left, I hope it's your left, but competing. Competing is when we need quick, decisive action. So maybe we need to enforce a policy, maybe there's a legal issue, maybe there's a safety concern, and we have to stand firm on it and actually say, this is the right way to do it. There is no gray area. When we use a competing style, it creates a win-lose environment. So it's my way, you have to do it this way. Now, there are times where we absolutely must enforce this, but also there are times where someone's style might be to be too competing. And when that happens, it can cause resentment, it can damage relationships. In an organization, if we've got a leadership team that is very competing, it can create a fear-based culture. It can stifle collaboration because people might feel, well, what's the point? You know, it's they're going to do it their way. That's it, their way or no way, and discourages input and creativity. So we're more likely to use a competing thing when we either have to, so let's say there's a legal or a safety concern, or when we feel that someone's behavior is absolutely intolerable. So we have to get that resolution. If we look below, so low assertiveness, low cooperativeness, we've got the avoiding style. And the avoiding style is perhaps when the issue is really minor and it's just not worth the effort. So often in therapy, I will encourage clients to choose their battles. Sometimes it is not worth having the difficult conversation. So we might choose the avoiding style consciously when that's the case, or maybe when we just haven't got all the facts yet. So we'll just let it go for a bit because we need some more time to gather the facts to prepare. It could also be used quite successfully when addressing the conflict might cause unnecessary harm. Perhaps it could escalate the problem. The problem with the avoidance style is it can be seen as really passive or indifferent. So it can seem as if it's uncaring. It can lead to frustration. And if you're the person engaging in the avoiding style too much, it can also feel like you're not really getting anything resolved for yourself either. Then we've got the accommodating style. The accommodating style is when the relationship is more important than winning. I would imagine there's plenty of us here that have had to use that countless times, but certainly with our own family, where we have had to just say, okay, we'll do it your way. This is sometimes really important to avoid escalating conflict. Sometimes it's really important because the other person's need is greater than yours. Maybe you've got a really stressed colleague that is dealing with challenges at home and they need some time off. But you know the workload is huge, But because you see their personal challenges, you accommodate their time off, being aware that actually you're going to lose from it. It's going to create a problem for you. It is really useful to build goodwill. It diffuses tension because the other person feels like they're getting a win. But of course, if we use the accommodating style too much, it can lead to being taken advantage of. So we don't want to use it overly. Then in the middle, we've got the compromising style. We're kind of led to believe that that might be the way forward. And in some ways, compromising is absolutely good. But if we look at compromising, both parties have to give up something to move forward. So compromising is useful if we don't quite have enough time to get a full-on resolution. It's like, okay, well, look, let's agree to disagree. It's when the middle ground solution is necessary. It's good for moderate stakes decisions when neither side can get everything they want, but it tends to lead to more mediocre solutions. So people don't tend to walk away from a compromise feeling fully satisfied. They tend to walk away thinking, well, that'll do. It's better than nothing. If we overuse the compromising style, it's going to lead to habitual trade-offs. So instead of creative problem solving, instead of understanding where we have to cooperate, where we have to be assertive, it's kind of this wishy-washy middle ground. And then finally, we've got the collaborating style. So this is high assertiveness, high cooperativeness. This is when both parties want a long-term mutually benefit solution. This can only really be reached when we've got trust, open communication. It's useful for more complex issues that require innovation, teamwork, creativity. And it does require some time and effort to build all of that, to explore a deeper solution. It's not always practical in time-sensitive or high-pressure situations. So the challenge there is that it's a long-term plan rather than a quick fix. Now, every one of us has a preferred conflict style. So some of us will prefer to avoid, some of us will prefer to collaborate. But really effective conflict resolution requires adaptability because not one of these conflict styles is the best one. So we need to recognize as people that we have a default style. So know that your default style is, oh, I always go into compromising and then I never really feel great about it. And learn when to adjust that. Learn when it's okay to use it. Learn when you need to actually recognize that in yourself. We should also be aware of assessing every situation individually before we react. So not just going into our default style. And we can even start practicing blending these styles. So maybe we start with the goal of collaboration. And if we can't get there, then we come back to compromise. Conflict is not about winning and losing, even though these conflict styles can be seen in that way. It's much more about finding the right approach for the situation. Your natural conflict style is something you've learned, and there are so many reasons for that. Usually our childhood experiences. If you had siblings, maybe, if you were the big sibling, if you're the little sibling, you'll have a different conflict style. But you can change that. You can develop flexibility in handling different conflict styles. You can learn how to apply this model so you can approach those difficult conversations with greater confidence and clarity. So if you haven't already reflected, I want you to think about what's your default conflict style. Do you tend to avoid conflict to keep the peace? Therefore, you're an avoiding style. Do you push your perspective strongly to try and win an argument? Is winning always really important? That might be a competing style. Do you compromise really quickly just to try and keep things moving? Do you prioritize relationships over outcomes? You might be accommodating. Or do you seek solutions that try and satisfy all parties collaborating? So useful to know this about yourself, because once we know this about ourselves, we can recognize when it's appropriate and when we actually need to pull back. So how do we navigate this? Well, there are lots of different things we can do when we have to enter a difficult conversation. The first thing I'd suggest is just recognize that it's difficult. Acknowledge those feelings. Understanding that I've got discomfort in this will prepare you for that conversation. So we don't have to pretend that it's fine. We can admit to ourselves or maybe a trusted colleague, I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. And maybe you can explore that a little bit. What is it that I'm uncomfortable with? Then try to shift your mindset. Instead of dreading the conversation, think about how you can approach it with some growth, some clarity, some resolution in mind. A tool that we use so often at Beam and that we teach so often is to use curiosity. I truly think curiosity is one of our superpowers. Curiosity moves us from being a participant to being an observer. So be curious about that conversation. What is it about this conversation that makes me uncomfortable? Is there something in this conversation that's reminding me of a past emotional hurt? Is there something in this conversation that I feel is unfair and unjust? Be curious about it. Be curious about the other person as well. What are they thinking? Structure your approach. So I'm going to teach you some structured frameworks in a moment, but using frameworks to help keep the conversation really focused and productive is great. What we don't want is a meandering conversation that goes round and round, maybe activates our nervous system to feeling threatened, and then actually never gets resolved. And then prepare for resistance. Maybe recognizing that this is a difficult conversation will help you create some strategies. So expect different reactions. Maybe if they're defensive, I can suggest another way of seeing it. Maybe if they become overly emotional, I can suggest a little break and we can reconvene. Maybe if they become angry, I can be really mindful of my nonverbal communication and diffuse it with my tone and my body language. These strategies not only help at the time of the conversation, but they also empower us to feel more confident. So three pillars for successful conversations. So the first I wanted to share with you is these 3 C's of a successful conversation. If we are going to have a difficult conversation, it becomes quite challenging. But actually, most people in a people-centric role are likely to be facilitating them as well as having them. And if we approach that with the 3 C's, we can handle it a bit more effectively. So the first is clarity. So get clear on your objective. A great question, first of all, is to ask yourself, what outcome do I want from this conversation? Avoid being vague. So vague feedback is never that helpful. Instead of saying something like, your performance has been poor, be more specific, objective, and fact-based. I've noticed that deadlines have been missed lately. Let's discuss what's happening. Let's see what we can do about it. This is where curiosity becomes your superpower. And I really say that truly, it's a game changer, whether you use it in your personal life or your professional life. Curiosity means that we're not making assumptions. We are curious about someone's behavior. What is going on with them that's made them miss a deadline? What is going on with them that's made them become more difficult within the team? No one just does that overnight. So using those open-ended questions that you will all be so good at having, things like, help me understand what's going on with you at the moment. What do you think is being contributing to that challenge? That curiosity will hopefully engage those open, honest conversations. And then apply compassion. We talk about compassion so much in our people sessions, where we need to balance honesty and empathy so that we can have those difficult conversations, but from a place of genuine care and concern for the individual. So it's not about calling out someone's bad behavior. It's about saying, I can see this is challenging for you. I want to help you. I want us to work through this. This is a really key component to us being able to create psychological safety in the workplace. And one of my favorite tools for doing all of this is putting the C.L.E.A.R framework in action. Some of you will again have come across this before, but the C.L.E.A.R framework for communication gives a really structured, psychologically safe approach to handling difficult conversations. So it's great if you are someone who wants to stay in control, reduce emotional resistance, and guide the conversation towards a productive outcome. So it starts with context. So we need to make sure that we clearly state why this conversation is happening, giving specific facts, non-emotive, just facts, rather than vague statements. So we've noticed that you've been coming into work late for the last couple of weeks, rather than it seems like you're really not that engaged in your job anymore. So facts. The next is listening. The sad part of most of us is we unfortunately don't listen with the intent of really taking on what someone's saying. We tend to listen with the intent of responding. So we tend to have so many assumptions. There are things that we talk about when we're giving therapy with clients, which are like thinking traps. We assume we know what's going on for that other person. We perhaps fortune tell, or if I'm going to say this, I know they're going to say that. Try not to. Try to truly listen to that person. Give them a chance to share their perspective before jumping in. There are so many little tricks for this, but being an active listener, so being engaged, affirming back what you've heard. So statements like, so if I'm getting this correctly, you feel X, Y, and Z. This will prevent misunderstandings. It'll prevent you going off on a tangent. And importantly, it makes that other person feel heard and respected. If we use active listening, like nodding, paraphrasing, validating, that must have been hard for you. Then we make that person feel psychologically safe. We get them to recognize that this isn't an attack. Then we've got explore. So be curious about identifying what's really going on. Dig deeper. Why is this issue happening? What else might be going on? This will help you uncover hidden factors. So maybe they've got a personal challenge going on. Maybe they haven't really been given clear expectations. It moves the conversation much more from blame to problem solving. So look for patterns. Is this a one-off thing? Have they just started with this challenge, or is this something that has been a repeated pattern through the years that they've worked there? Acknowledge their perspective, even if you don't agree. It's so important. I can see that's frustrating for you. I can see that's difficult for you. The next is action. So important in a conversation. So let's shift from problem to solution. This stops that conversation going around in circles. We've all been there. It feels never ending. It ensures accountability and it propels the conversation forward. So let's agree on how we improve this. From now on, let's organize some regular check-ins, or I really need to see an improvement in this area by a certain date. This makes sure that nothing's left unsaid. Both parties know what the expectations are. And then finally, resolve. So this is where we confirm and we follow up. We end the conversation with clarity and commitment, and then we follow it up to ensure progress has been made. So this reinforces accountability. This summarizes what's being said. So often if we have a heavy conversation, we can leave the room and only remember the bad stuff. So it summarizes it and it shows you're invested in them. So little statements like, thank you so much for being so open in this conversation. Let's keep talking. Let's reconvene again in a week's time. Or let's check in again on this date to see how things are going. Try and end it positively. Show some optimism. I want to help you. I want to see you succeed. I want to help you through this challenge. And then check in and reinforce those expectations. This framework is so powerful because importantly, it creates psychological safety. So an approach where people feel that they can speak their mind, it's non-threatening, it's fair, it's focused. It also gives you a consistent approach to your difficult conversations. You will consistently use this, and so people will come to expect that she listens to me. They have a real plan for the conversation. I feel that I'm heard. We commit to some actions, and they check in on me. And that will encourage real change, which is what we want. We want to see that change. We want to help someone achieve that. How do we cope if someone is particularly emotional or defensive? Because let's be honest, you can have the best framework in the world, but we don't know what someone's coming into the room with. They might be dealing with something so challenging at home that we didn't know about, that they respond really emotionally. So when tensions rise, you need to stay super calm. So that is being mindful of your nonverbal communication. So if someone's tone elevates, your tone goes quiet and calm. If someone's body language becomes forward and a little bit lungy, you sit backwards and open. We don't want folded arms. We don't want pointing. We don't want anything that could be interpreted as threatening. We want open hands. We want open body language. We want a nice, calm, placid tone. When we do that, we can handle someone in a highly emotional state. If we become reactive to them, then it's going to go badly wrong. So recognize that a difficult conversation for the other person could feel incredibly stressful. And therefore, if their brain goes into stress mode, we're going to deal with stress on our next session. You're going to learn loads about it. But if the brain goes into stress mode, we activate the amygdala, which triggers the fight or flight response. So that can trigger someone to become fight. So they're aggressive, they're defensive, they start raising their voice, their body language becomes more threatening. Or flight, they just want to get the heck out of there. They want to run away, they don't want to deal with it. So notice that if we start to see signs of that behavior, their stress levels have got too high. So we need to calm it down. People might see that it's an attack. So they might feel blamed, embarrassed, undervalued. They might feel that they haven't been heard or seen properly. So we want to diffuse that by making sure that we're listening, that we hear their side of it. And they might fear the consequences. I think most of us have had a situation where at some point in our career, a senior manager has said to us, I need to see you for a meeting after lunch. That's it. The only information they've given us. In that period of time, and it might only be an hour, we perhaps think we're going to get fired, we're going to lose our job, we're going to lose our home, we're going to end up homeless. It causes so much stress when we don't know what the consequences are. We will go to worst case scenarios. So people might be fearing really extreme consequences that you might know are never going to happen, but maybe they haven't been communicated. And then finally, my final bit is to kind of really push on this de-escalation. So if you are in that situation where someone is being really activated, they're responding negatively, their stress levels are high, pause. Just pause for a moment and acknowledge what they're going through. So I can see this is challenging for you. I can see you're upset by this. I can see that this is making you really angry. There's this amazing part of human beings that when we feel that we're being truly seen, it starts to de-stress us. So we start to recognize that, oh, okay, they recognize this. I feel a little bit better about that. I'm not on my own. Stay as neutral and non-judgmental as you can. I'm here to understand, not to criticize. I want to help in this. There is no right or wrong. I just want to hear what you've got to say. And if someone's becoming really upset, then reframe and redirect it. Okay, well, maybe we can't do anything with this right now, but let's focus on what we can do moving forward. If they completely shut down, give them some space. So maybe say, look, I don't want to push you. I want to support you. So maybe you want to take some time to go for a walk, or maybe you want to have this meeting again tomorrow. Let's take a breather. Let's reconnect. Let's stay in touch. I don't want to make you feel really uncomfortable. So as you can see, huge topic, so much to cover. I've tried to give you as many tools as I can in 40 minutes. A little summary is to really approach these conversations with clarity, curiosity, and compassion. Use that C.L.E.A.R framework. Really work on being calm, being neutral, and setting the tone. That you're there to help, you're there to support, you're there to understand. You're not there to be judge and jury. Any questions or comments on this? Tom and I will absolutely hang around, but I would suggest waiting until we've stopped recording for you to ask any questions off camera. I will hand back to Tom now, who's just going to wrap everything up for you.
Thank you very much, Lianne. Truly insightful session. Now, just a final reminder about our March offer. If stress and burnout are challenges in your organisation, then our Moving Through Stress workshop is a game changer. It's one of our most popular sessions, and for this month only, we're offering it at 50% off. But for the first 5 people, community organisations that book before the end of March. So you only have to book in March. We will deliver it through the rest of 2025. And it's a great chance to bring in practical science-based stress management tools into your workplace for just £275. So if you'd like to grab one of these slots, drop me a message. We'll put details in the follow-up email as well. So our next, our video and resources will all be emailed to you, and you can also access them through our website /PeopleHome. You can schedule a call with either of us to chat about any of your personal or professional needs. We will follow up with the LinkedIn group, which is the People Network. If you're not already a part of that, that's where we give frequent updates and posts around some of the topics that we're talking about. Now, our next People workshop is on stress management, and it's on the 8th of April. Just put the link into the chat if you want to sign on immediately, but this will be going out in the emails as well. So thank you all for coming along today. If you need any more help, then our details are on the screen, so you can contact Lianne or myself directly. So we'll probably stop recording now, and then if anyone wants to hang around for any questions, then including.
I think your microphone went then, Tom, but I will just say, does anyone have any questions? Oh, thank you very much. It's so cute when you see the little emojis. I still love that all these years later. Thank you.